So it's not end game now. We are just under the development period. How the future data center halls will look like and how we need to approach to the planning before we start building those. Okay? And this is something that is unique about this case. We not only deliver CDUs or immersion tanks, we deliver a complete idea of the data center. And this is, for us, the biggest revolution is, if you ask me as the DCX company, from just developing crypto mining containers or crypto mining halls into developing a future AI data center. That was a pivot for us.
Thank you, Thomas. Anita, if I may, what about you? What changes have you experienced in the last 12 months around your area of neutral facilities?
I think what we're seeing is a very interesting interplay of timelines. The network investments that underpin AI deployments, those happen in 25 to 30-year cycles. So to give you a bit of context, the first wave of the internet when it was rolled out in the late 1990s, we saw 1 to 10 Gbps network connections that the Googles and back then the Yahoos of the world were using. Right? With the advent of content came 100G network connections. With the advent of cloud came multiple 100Gs or 400Gs. We're starting to see the first 1 terabit per second circuits start the hyperscalers and some GPU as a service companies are investing in. The submarine cables that carry this traffic are investments that have time horizons of 25 plus years. So we're seeing that timeline collide with the data center investment timelines, where we're talking about 10, maybe 15-year investment time horizons, intersect then with the actual hardware refresh cycles within the GPU world, which when we talk to our clients seems to be bizarre, as low as 2 years. And we're trying to solve for the sort of an equation that has very different timelines. And we're trying to take a bet in terms of, so for example, David was making a point about floor lobes. Now, it's one thing to have an office building that can take fairly standard sort of workloads with a few servers, some network equipment. It's very different to then take a view that says, well, are we supporting 140 kilowatts a rack? Are we supporting what NVIDIA has announced at, for example, a megawatt a rack?
And
that costs real money.
1 ton per rack.
Yeah. So what we're seeing right now is the need to find a way to take a balanced view across these 3 timelines.
Thank you, Aditya. If I may, I'd like to change a bit tack, and Richard, if I may call upon you to describe further your services and let us know in the past year or so whether you've seen dramatic changes in terms of quantum computing and the application of quantum that are becoming a reality or will be the near-term reality.
It's good timing, actually, following on from what you said. I mean, imagining planning infrastructure on a 15-year horizon. So quantum computing is a completely different way, completely new way to approach computing. So I'll say one thing before I answer your question, which is that it is seen as an almost certainty that in the 15-year horizon, quantum computing starts to become much more mainstream. So included within your consideration of what the weight of all this electronics needs to be, you've also got to feature this completely different way of approaching the very basics, the very fundamentals of computing itself. So just to play things as very clearly, quantum computing is not a faster way to do computing. It's not a slightly better way of performing electronic calculations. It's a complete reinvention of how you approach the very fundamentals of not even computing data itself, it's a completely new form of data. Why do all of that? Well, because I think it's probably timed quite nicely. I've spent a lot of my career watching maybe optical computing might become a thing, and it was not. So I'm hopeful now that maybe quantum computing will become a thing, and there's a lot of momentum behind it, because there are such serious needs on the infrastructure side. And there's a reason why Google, IBM, NVIDIA, all of the major players, and all the small guys like Orca are doing this, is because we see a fantastic opportunity to be changing computing, significantly bringing down the energy consumption related to AI, performing AI or other forms of calculation that are beyond the limits of what's possible. So sorry, that's a lot of scene setting, just to sort of say what quantum computing is. So on it, what's really interesting is on year horizons, so year to year, there are major advances happening. And there's a technical level to that I won't bore you with, in increasing numbers of qubits, increasing qualities of qubits and things. But I think what's most astounding is, this is a new way of performing computing. No one really knows how to use these new computers. So you're starting to see, like with Orca, the actual integration of quantum computers with existing computing infrastructure. So what that means is leading, not necessarily on the storage side, but leading AI compute infrastructure projects are starting to incorporate quantum computers into their architecture. So they're starting to put quantum and classical computers together. So that's happening, and there have been now several deployments, probably in the world. There are probably 30 or so installations, all of which being leading compute centres. They've put a quantum computer next to a classical computer, and then what that does is allow users a completely new way to look at their computing. It can perform AI better, faster, more efficient, and those types of things. So I'll probably end there. I could be a lot more specific if you want me to be, but you asked me the question, what's happening in the last year? I don't know what the audience thinks of quantum computing. There is a reality behind it, which is it's hard and it's slow, but there is real adoption that's happening. And what I urge people to do is, if they're planning infrastructure on a 15-year horizon, it sort of should be there, at least as a consideration.
Thank you. Yes, David.
Is it okay if I'm controversial? It's 5 o'clock.
Please go for it.
I mean, are we looking at this the wrong way? It's the question is show me the money, in the sense of it's the question of balancing out these different timelines. And then quantum as well, but by the way, big fan. Genuinely. But the reality is that when I put my investor hat on, when I take a pound or a dollar or a yen off for an investor, they want me to give that plus a return back within a certain time frame. Just if you want to write that down, feel free. I suppose the point I'm making is, and I'll illustrate it with a story. So KO data is called KO data because in 1966, a fellow called Sir Charles KO, a research partner with George Hockham, invented optical fibre on our first site in Harlow in 1966. And yet, probably if I asked in this room, could you put up your hand if you live in a house that still doesn't have fibre, there'd be a few people here. So the answer is always, what is the ROI? What is the... what I'm asking the panel, who are clearly more capable in terms of these subjects of me, is when Jensen talks about a 600 kilowatt rack, what are we really using it for? What is the business case? What is the end goal? And if therefore we aren't there yet, it won't happen in the time frame that we're talking about, because businesses run on economics. So, almost with the exception of Thomas, I know, but those are the two questions are actually, what do you see as the business model for quantum computing? What do you see as the business model for a 600 kilowatt rack? Discuss.
Good question. I don't mind being a bit controversial. I mean, it's hard, and quantum is hard, because it's emerging yearly, it changes year by year. I think it's also fair to say it's not been fully worked out. So your investment case is hard, because it's largely technical. Actually, a lot this morning I spent at a quantum conference with people talking too much about quantum physics. It's not an investment-based decision at the moment. So all I can do is pinpoint, highlight several things that might change your financial investment thesis. And that is about the reduction in resources that's currently being predicted with a quantum. So 20% reduction, so some of our systems in the future, next year, we'll produce a 20% reduction in GPU usage for the same AI workload. But this is half prediction, half foresight, not financial reality. So, I mean, let's be honest, right? I mean, we're trying to accommodate a new technology that could be nothing. It could be everything. So, I mean, I'm not...
Oh no, and by the way, I'm not, don't get me wrong, I think that's how innovation happens, right? We innovated. My point about fiber is when that discovery was made, and by the way, just a caveat, what they really did was they worked out how to actually produce the fiber glass that made it happen. Yeah, they didn't definitively know the business case. Yeah, you have to do SDC labs, there has to be innovation. The question, I suppose, we're being tasked with slightly is, when you go 12 months as an example, and you go to 15 years, when are these adoption items happening, and what do we think the business cases are for them? Yeah, because that's when they flip over from being, I mean, liquid cooling to the chip is not a new thing. Of course, but now it's a real thing. Yeah, and I think
now it's going to run that business.
right, because it's got its business model. So the question is what are the business models for things like extreme high density compute?
So I think let me chip in here. I love that saying. Was it William Gibbons or whoever it was? The future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. You've got to understand the use cases and the ones that can be monetized. Right? I don't think with this side of the pond we will be monetizing 600 kilowatts of rack deployments. Why do I say that? If you look at what's happening with AI, and if you look at the sort of models that are being launched, that are being let loose in the wild, the underlying math has been around for 25, 30 years or so. What we're seeing now is an almost democratization of the use of AI in terms of text, in terms of audio, in terms of video. So the use case that is leading to network investments and that is leading to DC deployments, and I'll come to what specific Europe in a moment, by the way, is 1 million Netflix videos for 1 million viewers. What do I mean by that? I mean, today, here we are in London, what, about 6 million people. We all log into Netflix. We watch whatever is the latest Netflix movie, series, whatever is launched. It's the same video file that's copied and served to all of us. With multimodal AI, what you type in as a prompt and the video that you want or the audio file that you want is very different to what I prompt the AI model to generate, right? And that's very real. It's happening in front of our eyes. It's very easy to use these models, right? In my spare time, I do some stock analysis, not very well, I will confess. I was using Gemini Deep Research last weekend. What would take me about 3 days got compressed into about half an hour. A fairly detailed sectoral report that was created. This is here and now. Now, what's different and what's happening and what's monetizable is this. The supercomputer clusters that are training these models, so when we say training, what we mean is you throw 50,000 pictures at a neural network and you say, this is a cat, this is a dog, that's a tree. Inference is where you throw the 50,001 picture at the model and say, now you tell me what it is. Right? That training is predominantly happening stateside. Okay? But that's pretty much, if you tune into the likes of Ilya Sutskever and so on and so forth, who claim, we've used up all the data on the internet or whatever, and scaling laws are dead, etc., etc. Actually, they're not. The architecture of AI is changing, where that training is getting split up. It's called distributed training. Okay? You're not going to see the 300 or 500 megawatt GPU clusters coming to Europe. You might see the 20 or 30 megawatt distributed clusters coming to Europe. What you will definitely see is inference clusters coming to Europe. The rack densities of these, coming back to the saltwater and the money question, and what is monetizable, is much lower. We're not talking of 600 kilowatt racks in the data center world. We're talking of between 100 to maybe 150, a maximum of 200 kilowatts a rack for at least 7 to 8 years as a time horizon. And that, I think, is enough certainty to produce an investment thesis.
Thank you, Aditya. If I may, I'm conscious of time and have a few minutes left on the key. So I'd like to move on. We looked at cost situation, the challenges, including investment, convincing investors about quantum computing. I'd love to project ourselves into the future, opportunities into the future, and perhaps I'd like to give a chance to Thomas to talk to us about immersion cooling and how perhaps that will be more required into the future, and then we can go to Richard for quantum, and then David, and then Aditya.
Yes, and currently, if we speak about liquid cooling, most of you probably consider CDUs and pumps and racks and cold plates and so on. But there's the other part of that market, it's immersion cooling, very well developed on the crypto mining space. Like if we speak about liquid cooling, there it's like 90% is immersion. So the technologies there, market has proof checked that technology with so power hungry ASIC miners, so it's ready for AI load or for the heavy load. So observe that trend also as it's there already.
Thank you, Thomas. Richard, please paint us a rosy picture for the next 10 to 15 years, and then I'll move on to David, please.
Yeah, I think it probably might keep springboarding off the previous point. I mean, quantum's funny, right? Because it's never going to be used for standard data centers. So
no computer games?
No, you don't use a quantum computer to store data indoors. So for the majority of maybe data centers that are out there, they're obviously not worried about quantum computers, it doesn't matter. But the data centers that do matter aren't really, they're more on the processing side, especially the very cutting edge where performance matters above everything else. So finance, defense, energy, where there's a massive competitive edge to be gained from computational capability. So you build a better computer, there's a massive outsized return that you can get from that.
Thank you.
If I can add something. You need a data center to run quantum computing. Why? Because you need to structure data in a special way, and quantum computer can process that data ultra fast. So you need even bigger data center to be able to provide that data for quantum computer to compute anything, right? If not, it will finish it in seconds, right? So data centers will stay with us, and quantum computers will just rise next to the data centers. Right?
David, if you put your gold acre investor hat on, what are the areas that excite you when you want to invest, in the midterm?
So the area that excites me is the tipping point. I'm going to call, standing on one leg, the tipping point of reliability. When stock pickers condense 3 days work into 3 hours, the question is what's the quality of the work? And so the issue, like with anything, like streaming had the same, is that right now AI is right 80% of the time. So what I'm looking for is how the technologies and the advancements in the large language models that actually make that tipping point of reliability that I can 99.9% rely on the outcomes. When I can do that, that is an unbelievably ubiquitous and globe-changing product.
Thank you, David. Aditya, the final review to your vision to the future, the opportunities, and line of work in particular.
I will go back to my mental model, which was sequencing the investments the right way. So for us, it's about how we're developing global peering markets in the locations that we are operating in. That provides a sustainable revenue source from which we can develop everything else in some of the AI adjuncts. I will add one or two final points. I think trying to bring together what David and Dr. Richard were saying. I think we're seeing almost Cambrian evolution in terms of the capabilities of AI models. There is the sort of research being done that's not yet out in the wild. I think keeping an eye on that, but the here and now in terms of what is going to generate revenues over the next 3 to 5 years, I think is a good focus for us.
Thank you, Peter. Looking at conference organizers, do we still have a bit of time for questions from the audience?
Yeah, well, maybe one question.
Okay, one question. Someone would like to... Anyone? Yes, please.
On the financing side, I found out last week how much a single quantum rack is going to cost. And I suppose back to your question, David, around once we go past, I suppose, the military national security applications, how our capital market is going to find a way to play when it's $1 million per rack, right?
It's a really good question, because that isn't the same with all vendors. So, I mean, Orca's approach has been to sell quantum computers for $2 million a rack. I don't know what you heard. The rumour is that the IBM system costs $60 million a rack. And people are still thinking about it because it's that game changing. So I personally agree, I think that's pretty unviable from a commercial point of view. But things are changing. I mean, we radically reduced the price point of quantum computers. So this is an example, I don't know how many people I managed to convince, maybe not you, but quantum computing is changing rapidly. Those expectations that you have of AI, I mean, how has that come about? A radical change in the hardware quite possibly could lead to massive improvements in generative AI. And how many of you would be talking about not being interested in quantum if that was the case? So there's a risk profile. I don't mind suggesting that quantum's risky, but there's also an outside reward if that risk pays off. And that's why people are investing in quantum. So it's not for everyone, certainly not every data center, but it is happening.
Bottom line is that we're having a whip round after this. So if you want to put in a few quid, you'll find out what happens.
Thank you. I'm conscious that there's so much more we could say on those, but please, I'm also conscious we haven't even addressed edge computing or LEO satellite constellations. However, thank you very much to our audience, and thank you very much to our panelists. Please join me in for a round of applause.